State. Finally, I wish to call on all public servants and political office holders to keep subscribing with an abiding faith.
The State Head of Service, Bayo Phillips, encouraged workers to remain dedicated to their duties.
Public service rule, we are not partisan. We only chose not to be unlucky. We decided not to change a favorable equation.
Expectations of the workers in Ondo State are very high, and they are also expecting more from the state government. Ayodeji Moradeyo, TVC News, Akure.
Let's take a short break, and when we return, we'll be discussing expectations and projections for 2025. Stay with us, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. Nigeria, under the saddle of President Bola Tinubu, has undergone a number of tough but necessary reforms, ranging from politics to economy, petroleum to finance. Now, as we step into 2025, the expectations of Nigeria and the government, especially the president, is high. The question is, can the government and indeed the president meet all these expectations from Nigerians? For this and more, I am now joined by Opeyemi Agbaje, CEO, RTC Advisory and former head of department, Lagos Business School, Department of Strategy, is an entrepreneur, social and political environment of business and business law. Also in the studio here with me is Nelson Ekujimi, public affairs analyst. Gentlemen, Happy New Year to you and welcome to Politics Tonight. Mr. Agbaje, Happy New Year to you. Can you hear me? You may need to unmute your device, Mr. Agbaje, but let me start from the studio, Mr. Ekujimi. It's a new year. How challenging would you describe 2024 for the present administration?
Well, thank you very much. It's a fact that 2024 was a year in which the economic reforms of the government started to manifest. And you know, when you have just given birth to a new baby, it is not unlikely that a lot of complications and what have you could arise. But by and large, if you look at the performance of the economy in 2024, you can rightly say or thump your chest and say there's light at the end of the tunnel. Because, for example, you saw that the economy, the foreign reserves, has increased to about $42 billion. We have also seen a situation whereby we have recorded, trade surpluses for 3 consecutive quarters, which means we are now exporting more than we are importing. We have also seen the coming on stream of local refineries. What does it translate to? It means the forex that we'll be using to purchase refined petroleum products will now be saved. And again, some of the refineries are now exporting this product, meaning that we are going to be earning foreign currencies. We have also seen the amount of foreign direct investment that has come into the country. You can see that the Euro bond as well as the dollar bond were oversubscribed. So it tells you clearly that the confidence that Nigerians and the international community have in this economy, is very, very robust. And that could be gleaned from, if you look at when Mr. President had the presidential media chat, you saw that the stock market increased astronomically. We also saw the stability. We have also seen stability in the exchange rates over a couple of months or for over two quarters. The stock market, the forex volatility that we used to experience, where dollar is 1,400 naira to a naira today, and by tomorrow is 1,800 naira, 1,000, is no longer there. And so if you look at the projections in the 2025 budget, you can thump your chest and say, absolutely,
we'll come to the budget in a minute, but what hope of a better Nigeria in 2025?
Yes, the hope of a better Nigeria in 2025 can be gleaned from those things that the government is putting in place. For example, today, everybody agrees that the interest rate is on the high side. And what has the government done? The government has come in with a buffer. And that buffer is the National Credit Guarantee Company that will provide loans to small-scale industrialists. Because you and I know for free that a lot of economies all over the world are being run by small-scale industrialists. In this way, government is looking for a way to provide those necessary resources that will allow the small-scale industries or small-scale enterprises to do business at a very low cost. So if you look at the projections for 2025, for example, as at third quarter in 2024, the government had already achieved about 75% of its revenue target, which means by the end of the fourth quarter, maybe they would have achieved about 90%. Means that a lot of leakages, and part of those leakages is the fuel subsidy regime that has been abolished by this administration. It means there's no longer free money anywhere for anybody. If you want to get money in Nigeria now, you have to invest in the economy and you make your profit. And that has been the mantra of Mr. President, even when he goes on his foreign trips.
Right. All right, let's speak with Mr. Kwemi Agbaje. Mr. Agbaje, I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, I hear you. I hope you hear me.
Yes, I can. So let's talk about the president's New Year broadcast. I mean, the president had said he's ready to solve myriads of problems facing Nigeria. How hopeful should Nigerians be?
I think Nigerians should be hopeful. Clearly, the objective conditions in the economy are becoming significantly different from the conditions prevailing for most of 2024, and indeed beginning from the reforms in the middle of 2023. The gentleman in the studio has itemized some of those changes. But the first comfort Nigerians can have is that this was not something that happened. It was not an accident. It was the result of collective structural reforms. So, of course, we removed the subsidy. That meant inflation would go up. It was not a surprise. It was not that the government didn't know what was happening. Inflation going up, the deregulation of the currency were deliberate policies. They were meant to avert, in my view, a disaster, an economic tragedy that was about to befall the country as we frittered away 10.6 trillion naira every year on both the FX subsidy and the petroleum subsidy. Both of those have gone. The other point is that the oil subsidy or the oil sector outlook has changed dramatically. So, for instance, now you have, like has been mentioned, 3 domestic refineries working. We have a fully domestic and deregulated downstream petroleum sector. Even on the upstream, we're having significant new investment. Shell signed a $5 billion final investment decision. Total Energies announced the $1 billion of investment. ExxonMobil announced $10 billion of investments over a period of time. We've had the completion of the Seplat deal and the Shell Renaissance deal. So the outlook for the Nigerian energy sector, in particular oil and gas, has changed dramatically. The other thing is the outlook for inflation. The biggest problems Nigerians have faced is, of course, that inflationary pressure. And understandably, it's been 33, almost 34% inflation. Any citizen would complain. That's historically high, it's 30-year high. But the good news is that the drivers of inflation we have exhausted most of the drivers of inflation. So it's inevitable that inflation will begin to trend downwards. The government has an ambitious target of 15%. If the government achieves that 15% inflation target, of course, Nigerians will feel a lot more, the pains will ease significantly because inflation takes away purchasing power. It takes away the money in your pocket and therefore impoverishes people. So I feel that as inflation begins to reduce in 2025 and all the pressure on our dollars from the petrol market have eased, the currency begins to stabilize.
All right, Mr. Agbaje, talking about the people, because of that New Year broadcast message, the president was very particular about the vulnerable in the society. He says the economic aspirations and the material well-being of the poor, the most vulnerable and the working people shall not be neglected. In his words, he says It is in this spirit that we're going to implement a new national living wage for our industrious workers this new year. It's not only good economics to do this, it's also a morally and politically correct thing to do. What's your impression about that?
Well, absolutely correct. We must pay attention. As we talk about all these reforms and the successes that are beginning to emerge, it's going to take a lot of time to trickle down. So we have to take specific action in relation especially to the poor and the vulnerable. So the government is talking about 15 million households receiving some stipends from the government under the transfers, conditional transfers. They're talking about a lot of social programs. They're trying to introduce the price of transportation through the CNG initiative. And now they're talking about things like credit guarantee schemes and the hint of a living wage. I wait to hear more details of what the president has in mind in relation to that. But the principle I agree with, we must take specific social investment steps to assuage the pains of the most poor and the most vulnerable while the effects of reforms continue to manifest for the larger economy.
All right, let me come back to the studio. Mr. Kujimi, the issue of living wage, what are your expectations?
Well, my expectations for a living wage can be premised on the fact that those indices that makes the wage not to be living must be addressed. And why do I say this? You look at the cost of transportation, you look at the cost of food, and like we said earlier on, the projections that we have for 2025 can be gleaned from the budget, projection, budget appropriation, where the government is going to spend the largest chunk of the 2025 budget on security. You and I know the damage insecurity has done to our food security as a country. We also know that as at present, the high cost of PMS, which is the major driver for transportation, is being assuaged by the energy mix we now have on board, where the government is rolling out, CNG buses that will make, transportation to be cheaper. And when transportation is cheaper, it means the worker will have more money in his pocket. So the issue of, I don't subscribe to raising wages. Rather, I subscribe to those things that the average worker spends his wages on being brought down through economic policies. And those are the things, like we've seen the investment in agriculture presently. And even Mr. President also talked about, he's being concerned about the cost of food and medicine, and that they are investing heavily to ensure that local production of most of those products, will ensure that the prices are brought down. And when we are talking about the National Credit Guarantee Company, it's to help these industries so that the cost of business will be low, and in that case, the price of goods and services, the price of medicine, pharmaceutical drugs and what have you, will also come down. So it's not about increasing wages, because wages can only be addressed based on provisions of the law. You and I know for free that under the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as at today, the wages of workers can only be reviewed every 5 years, even though last year Mr. President promised to bring it downwards to 3 years, which shows clearly that he was concerned. But the concern of some of us is that those things that makes for a living, that makes the wage to be a living wage, is what we should focus on. And I'm sure with the policies being put in place, for example, we talk about people are now using CNG cars and vehicles in the country. And the good thing about it also is that the government even went as far as giving free conversion to commercial vehicles in order to address, the mass interest of Nigerians. So for me, it's not about increasing wages. It's about the parameters that makes for the calculation of what a living wage should be. Those are the things that should be addressed. And I'm sure if you look at the budget and the projections of the government, those things are being looked into.
All right, I want to talk about ease of doing business in Nigeria, and also considering the president's promise to remove bottlenecks impeding business competitiveness in Nigeria. Yeah. How have we fared? Or how are we faring?
Oh, for example, if you look at some of the innovations coming from the Ministry of Solid Minerals, you look at the Ministry of Internal Affairs, those are parameters that will make for the ease of doing business. But a lot still needs to be done. And that is, for example, under the new tax reform bills, you can see that the ease of doing business is being addressed, whereby the government is trying to eliminate multiple taxation that has been a clog in the wheel of doing business in Nigeria, by ensuring that we now have a standardized and one phase revenue collection mechanism. So these are many more, and what the government is presently embarking on, and we can only, as citizens, we can only ensure that we monitor these processes and we add our voices where we observe challenges, because some of these new innovativeness will also come with their own, challenges. But it is left for us
where we are. Challenges?
Yes, in implementing a policy, until you start implementing that policies, then you see, one or two plus or one or two minuses. But when you just propose it, it's a sweet thing to think. But actual manifestation of your ideas will also bring up a lot of things, either in the positive or in the negative. So it is for us to engage with the necessary stakeholders. That, for example, when you talk about ease of doing business, you talk about accessibility to loans, accessibility to funds by industrialists. How easy is it for them to access funds? A lot of them have to approach the conventional banks, to access funds to do their business. But if the government has, agencies in place that can act as a buffer, that instead of you going to the banks to ask for loans for those high interest rates, that there's a government window. For example, you look at some of the states, you have, like, for example, in Lagos State now, you have the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund that gives soft loan to businesses at ridiculously low interest rate that is not comparable to what you have in the financial market. So the federal government is also, towing that same line. So those are part of the parameters that will allow for the ease of doing business in any environment. But most importantly is that as business interest persons, as economists, we must also always keep our eyes on the boss and look at the system, because it involves human beings. Where we see challenges, we should look at how to immediately provide solutions to those challenges in order for us to have a better business environment.
All right, Mr. Gweje, let me get your perspective on that same question, because the president also promised to remove obstacles in the path to Nigeria's greatness. For you, what are the measures?
I think in talking about ease of doing business, at this point in time, we must pay particular attention to the logistics around exports. Nigeria has a great opportunity to boost its exports revenue and stabilize our foreign exchange market, not necessarily through government allocations of oil proceeds, but from export proceeds by a vast majority of businesses. Now, one of the impediments I know as somebody who consults business is that the conditions and the logistics around the ports, the customs, the export logistics and all of that is still has to be made optimal and facilitative, rather than like obstacle raised that many of our exporters face. If we make exports seamless, if we help to reduce all of the difficulties around exporting, we have a huge opportunity at this time with the exchange rates very high. There's a lot of incentive for people to engage in exports, and not just necessarily big companies. Individuals, small LSMEs can look for opportunities in this e-commerce driven world, and everybody can export, and we can vastly change the outlook for our exports. So I would suggest that government should pay, and the Minister of Trade Investment should pay particular attention to export logistics. That can significantly change the outlook for Nigeria's economy.
All right. Let me stay with you, Mr. Agbaje, because Mr. President, the Vice Presidents, the governors and NAS members met yesterday where they acknowledged, what Nigerians are going through. And the President had told them how important they are to Nigeria's development and prosperity. State governors have been accused of not doing enough for their citizens. Do you share this sentiment?
Frankly, given the dramatic increase in the revenue flows that have gone to Nigeria's sub-regionals, the states and the local governments, can Nigerians honestly say that they've seen the impact of that doubling or in some cases tripling of revenues in the states and local governments? I do not think so. Yeah, and I kind of hold the government, the federal government, somewhat responsible, not because they are the ones who may not have given as much value as could have been possible, but because there was an obligation on us to communicate the resources that these states and local governments are now collecting to their citizens at the states and the local government, so that they can be held accountable by their own citizens. So I would like something that we did once in our economic history, publishing all of the allocations that each state, each local government receives on a monthly basis, so that the citizens can then evaluate and say, did we see 200 billion naira of value in our state this month? And then perhaps there may be some accountability. So yes, I share that view.
Mr. Agbaje, asked the question because in the third and last quarter of 2024, analysts continue to say only the federal government cannot be saddled with the responsibility of ameliorating the hardship on citizens. So what do you think states and local government areas can do to assist citizens?
As a matter of fact, they are the primary entities that can ameliorate the surface of the people. I watched the incongruity recently in which one state government was calling on the federal government to come and deal with poverty in the state. Most of the things that have a bearing on poverty, apart from policy, such as policy that may result in inflation, such as policy that may result in devaluation of the currency, but in terms of the services and the standard of living, most of the things that can impact poverty are under the purview of the states. Agriculture, for instance. What have many of the states done to improve agricultural output, to provide transportation to the farms and to the markets, to improve on their public transportation and mass public transportation for their citizens? Many education, primary health care, these are all state responsibilities, and in some cases, even local governments. So if the states and the local government pay attention, ensure they provide value to their citizens for all the things under their purview, poverty will be significantly ameliorated. So yes, federal government should continue to work on policy and interventions that may help in assuaging poverty and unemployment, but I think the states need to do more.
All right, gentlemen, let's take a break, and when we return, we'll take a look at other national issues. Stay with us, everyone.
Doubt and fear doesn't occur at the canvas, it shows in the canvas. It shows the conation of raw earthen material slabbed, stroked and molded at a pace provided by the doubt and fear. Every move way in the struggle of one to the other, merging the past to the present, brushstrokes of colors seen but not known. For when the wailing stops, the pieces settle down in abject beauty erected for a century of a century. Speaking, advocating, protesting as the arts are meant to be.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you very much for staying with us. Tonight, we're discussing expectations and projections for 2025. And I've been speaking with Nelson Ekwijime, Public Affairs Analyst, and Okpeyemi Agbaje, Founder CEO of RTC Advisory Services Limited. Gentlemen, thank you very much for staying with us in the program. Now, let me continue this conversation from the studio. Mr. Kujimi, are state governors doing enough?
Well, absolutely not. And for me, it's a good thing that a lot of the states right now have sent their budget proposals to the State House of Assembly, and some of them have even signed the 2025 appropriation bill into law. The question we need to ask ourselves, those budgets for 2025 by these state government, how are those budgets, the appropriations in those budgets, how are they going to address the basic needs of Nigerians? You talk, for example, about, Agbaje talked about the transportation sector. You want to look at what is the appropriation for public transportation in some of these states that have huge population. You look at agriculture also, for example. You and I know for free that no matter the federal government's intervention in agriculture is only complementary to whatever the state, because the federal government does not have land anywhere. You look at the issue of infrastructure as a whole. You look at the issue of security. So one expects that as Nigerians, if we want to really drive this economy, want a better Nigeria for us all in 2025, we should begin to interrogate the budgets of the various state governments as well as the local government. It should not be the attention. A lot of us, in fact, even if I'm sleeping, if you ask me the budget, the size of the budget for 2025, I can tell you offhand, 49.7 trillion naira. But if you ask me the budget size for any of the states, I cannot. That tells you the misplaced priority by a lot of us Nigerians. So we need to ask the states, what are they doing to ameliorate? Is it transportation? Is it agriculture? How are they investing in agriculture to bring down the price of, foodstuff? Because food inflation is a critical issue affecting the everyday Nigerian. You talk about health facilities, for example, the primary health care centers that is under the local government. In what conditions are they? You talk about education. Is it the primary schools under the local government or secondary schools under the state government? What are the provisions, to ensure that, they take people out of poverty? Then you ask also, what are the social intervention schemes in those budgets that will address the needs of the vulnerable and the needy? So a lot of us have made the error to focus majorly on the federal government, forgetting that the states control a large expanse of the Federation of Nigeria, unlike the federal government. And we must also commend President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for signing into be the electricity law 2024 that gives states the power under law to generate and transmit. So we should be acting. If I'm talking about epileptic public power supply now, I should be able to look my governor in the state and say, Mr. Governor, how are you addressing? Now we can no longer push it and say, oh, it's in the exclusive list. It's not in my power. No, under the law, it's within your powers to make my life better, to ensure that I have electricity.
Because really, Mr. Kujimi, this is not the first time the president will be meeting these governors. He's had several meetings with them, urging them to improve the living conditions of their citizens, improve the welfare of their workers. This is a new year. Do you see any changes? Do you see them, doing something different this year?
I believe, even if Mr. President meets them a million times, I believe the only people that can drive these governors to sit, and do the needful are the citizenry. For example, I've just given you a clear illustration of the mindset of an average Nigerian. If you ask me what is the budget, the national budget for 2025, I'll tell you. But you can't ask me of even the state I'm living in. I don't even know. So it means a lot of us have misplaced priority about how to drive this our economy, how to project for 2025 to be better for all of us. And what that tells you and I is that we need to start interrogating the activities of our state governments and also our local government administration to ensure that they play their role, because, like even Mr. President has rightly acknowledged, they are the major drivers. Because a lot of these functions of what affects the citizenry, the power resides in the hands of the governors. But because a lot of us, we turn our blind eye to what happens in our state, and even when I have a problem with my wife at home, I'm asking President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, what are you doing about it? Forgetting that I have a local government chairman that is next door to my house. So we need to change our focus. We need to change our advocacy. our advocacy should not be about what the federal government is doing alone. It should be about what is the state government. In fact, we need to put the budget of all the states on the table and point out how they are deviating from issues that affects the well-being and welfare of the Nigerian people.
All right, Mr. Agbaje, let me come back to you. Tax reforms have come to stay, but open to negotiations on VAT, says Mr. President. And, you know, realistically, for those opposing the bill, one of the points they have raised with regards to VAT is, yes, this is beneficial to low-income earners, MSMEs, but if you charge companies higher, it will definitely affect low-income earners because business owners would pass the burden to consumers. What kind of negotiation are you expecting, especially now that the president says is ready to negotiate?
Yes, I mean, I really hope that we have progress on these tax reforms in 2025. I find some of the arguments I hear against it, particularly the one that says it took us 20 years to pass PIB, was the rush. And I don't think those are proper arguments. I think we should negotiate the tax reform bills on their merits. And in my view, the most of those tax reform bills are actually in favor of the poor. First of all, on the VAT, we excluded necessities, food, education, things like that. We've excluded them. So the higher rate that is being talked about does not apply to necessities that allow the poor to make a living for themselves. That's an important point in my view. The second point, even on the income tax side, the thresholds for taxation have also been raised high, again, favoring the poor. So most people may not even pay any income tax based on the higher thresholds for taxation. So, and even in terms of the states and the regions of the country, the evolution towards VAT based on consumption rather than on the location of the head office of the company, I would have thought that was patently favorable to the regions and to the states. For instance, the example that we've seen tested in the public domain, if you take telecommunications, today all the VAT on MTN or Airtel simply goes to where their head office is situated, which is Lagos. That does not seem to me, and I would have thought that people would celebrate a migration away from that approach towards one based on consumption, no matter which state of the federation, to the extent that there's some consumption of MTN or Airtel services or Glo or any of the other ones, then your VAT accruing can only be better than when 100% of it went to Lagos. Mm. And that's the same example, whichever, so even for consumption of banking services, it will now be based not just on where the headquarters, most of the headquarters of the banks are based in Lagos, but now if you move to a consumption-based system, then wherever there are bank customers and they consume banking services, that's where the VAT.
But why do you think the NLC president is insisting that those bills be withdrawn?
I frankly do not understand their perspective. I don't know why people would just say the bill should be withdrawn. It doesn't seem to me like the proper approach. I think the proper approach is we're moving towards this stage of legislation in which there will be public hearings. The president has indicated a willingness to negotiate. The gentlemen in charge of the tax reform have all been engaging with the public, explaining things. What's the logic in demanding that the process be truncated first, withdrawn, and then we start again? When we know that these people were working for over a year to come up with these drafts, they did consultation visits, there was a wide group of agencies and regions represented in the group, and all of that. So my advice, and I would just plead that all the stakeholders should allow us, including Labour, including NLC or TUC, all of them, and the regions, the state governments, the northern state, all of those who have objections, I hope that we should focus on the merits of the bill. I plead that we should not politicize the process. We should focus on the financial aspects, the income aspects, the social aspects of these bills, and then negotiate based on our interests, rather than take hardline political interests. That would be the only rational way. The idea that we can take 5 years or 10 years to reform our tax bill demonstrates a perspective that is not conscious of the urgency of fiscal and revenue reforms in Nigeria. Thank God that President Tinubu had the courage to remove the subsidy and to deregulate and to liberate the FX market, which then defied the problems that we face. But if we then fail to take urgent action on tax reforms, we may create new problems for us.
All right then. Mr. Kujimi, why do you think the NLC is insisting that the bills be withdrawn?
Well, like Mr. Gwadia and millions of Nigerians, I'm confused because I don't know whether the NLC president was speaking for himself or for the generality of the Nigerian worker.
Oh, okay.
Because this is a bill that aims to ensure that the average worker has more money in his pockets. This is a bill that is meant to create more revenue depending on your ability to consume in your state. So the bill is a people and poor friendly bill. So if the NLC president, who is presiding over an organization that is for the interest of the Nigerian worker, can come out to say that a bill that is meant to augment the living condition of the Nigerian worker should be withdrawn, then I think we need to have a rethink about what that organization stands for. Because in this age and time, I expect any rational mind, if you have any misgivings about the bill, to look at the bill and point out your areas of a disagreement. Because no matter how, assuming without conceding that the bill is flawed, you should be able to say Section 1, Section 2 does not align with my position. This is my position. But, they are not talking about that. Rather, it is withdraw the bill. Somebody was even saying, this is not the right time. And the question I asked, when is it right to do the proper thing? So the NLC president, I'm sure, the statement he made, because he represents the Nigerian Labour Congress as the head, and he is supposed to represent the interests of the workers, I'm sure that statement by him must have started, ruffling feathers, even within the workers, system. So I cannot speak for him. But like Agbadi rightly said, I think we should appeal to our people that this bill, that Nigerians who are against this bill should be bold enough to let us engage on. The president has sent the bill to the National Assembly. The National Assembly is going to hold a public hearing. Whatever be your view about the bill, the suggestions you want there, what you want deleted there, is for you to aggregate your views when the public hearing starts, such that whatever the National Assembly will come up with will be an aggregation of the consensus views of Nigerians. Because right now, once the bill goes to the National Assembly and they conduct their public hearing, don't forget that that bill, when it is packaged by the National Assembly, then it will be sent to Mr. President for his assent. As we speak, Mr. President does not have any powers to do anything with regards to the bill, because the powers to touch the bill or do anything on the bill now rests with the National Assembly. So I cannot speak for Mr. Joe Ajeru.
All right, gentlemen, let's wrap up tonight's conversation with the president's economic diplomacy. The president continues with his drive to attract foreign investors into the country to boost the economy. How well do you think this is yielding the desired result?
If you look at the economy in 2024, Mr. Gbadi, itemized some of, like Shell is investing about $5 billion in Bonga North oil field. DSB, an agricultural firm in Brazil, is investing about $2.5 billion. So you can see the level of foreign direct investment that is coming into the country. And don't forget also that apart from being the president of Nigeria, the president is the chief marketer. Whatever you hear from the president is the law. And that is why the president has taken upon himself, to generate that confidence by going out directly to assure, the foreign investors. And we can see it with regards to, the oversubscription for the local dollar bond as well as the euro bond. And we can also see it reflect on our stock market, whereby today the stock market is doing very well. You can also see the gains from the president's trips with the trade surplus that we are recording. So by and large, the economic diplomacy by Mr. President is already yielding fruit, and we can only expect that more will still come.
All right, Mr. Agbaje, I mean, the president has taken the issue of economic diplomacy seriously, such that is referred to as the chief marketer of Nigeria. I'm sure you heard Mr. Ekujimi. So how significant is this for the administration?
Absolutely. You know, I was a bit concerned in the early stages. We were not immediately seeing the results, which was in the end understandable. But now the pipeline of investments is growing. In the energy sector is most impressive. As has been mentioned, we have a mounting list of new investments in the energy sector, both by the majors, Shell, Total Energies, ExxonMobil. All of them have announced new investment, and even to the Nigerian entities, Oando, Renaissance, Africa, Seplat, and all of them. So there's momentum in the energy sector. Now that means increased foreign currency earnings. That means improvement in our energy supply situation and in our export situation. But beyond that, we saw the successful trip to China, we saw the successful trip to France, we saw the successful trip to India. I think what we now need, in my view, and I believe that the recently appointed Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment should have the capabilities to now deliver a structured marketing approach, investment shows, sectoral approach, showcasing all the sectors. I would particularly like to see increased activity with infrastructure and with mining, amongst others. Of course, even
I like that you've gone there, Mr. Agbaje, because the president has always assured the investors that their investments are safe in Nigeria. What do you think the government needs to do to ensure this?
Well, generally improve security. Okay. If not for anything, just to improve perceptions of investment in Nigeria. Perceptions matter. Even when the insecurity in many parts may not have direct bearing on economic activity, but improve security, improve law enforcement around financial crimes, and that perception of Yahoo, that you could be defrauded. It's not just a perception, it's a reality. All the scams that involve Nigerians, they deter some investment. Beyond that, like I said, the structural approach from the ministerial level. The president is doing his own work of top-level advocacy. But you now need follow-through at the ministerial level, at policy levels, at institutional levels.
All right. Mr. Ekujimi, let me wrap up with you. The president has spoken twice in the last 1 month. How do you describe his communication strategy?
Well, the communication strategy has been very good. And you can see it from the reactions to those communication. Like recently, the media chat, you saw how it affected the exchange market positively. You also saw it affected the stock market positively. All right. So that is a pointer to the effectiveness of his communication strategy, that once he keeps that going, then we can expect better results as the days go by.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's our first episode of the year. Thank you so much for coming. I've been speaking. Happy New Year to you. Mr. Agbaje, thank you so much. I've been speaking with Okwemi Agbaje, policy and economic analyst, and also Nelson Ekujimi, public affairs analyst. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time on the program. Thank you. And thank you very much for watching, everyone. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at midnight. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke WO using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Happy New Year once again.